Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Dr. John Terry, and welcome to another installment of Tune Into Sales. I am so excited to have a good friend of mine today that I've had an opportunity to get to know over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, and have really gotten to appreciate not only what he does, but who he is as an individual. Now, this gentleman, Mike Terrio, is a multi-million-dollar personal producer. He has gone on to take his talent of what he's learned through his own personal experience and is now using that to train and teach other financial professionals how they too can see success in this industry. He's currently running an organization called Motiv8 Advisors, which is an IMO located in the Treasure Coast of Florida. And I'm super excited to have him on today because we want to talk about seminars today and how successful seminars are run. And I can tell you right now, Michael Terrio is a master of being able to run successful seminars. Now, Mike, you're also a systems and processes guy. So I want to welcome you first to the podcast. And secondly, I just kind of want to throw the question out there just to kind of get things started. You know, you talk about systems and processes quite a bit and had an opportunity to speak at your conference. And before we get into the topic of seminars, I want to ask right off the bat, why are systems and processes so important for the financial advisor today? And what's the one system or process that you see many of them missing that are causing them not to scale their business the way they could?
Sure. No, well, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be on here. The honor is all mine. I really look up to what you guys are doing. I really appreciate you let me be part of this whole thing and kind of get my voice out there. It means a lot to me. So thank you for doing this and thank you for helping other producers out there. So systems, man, it's a loaded thing, but it's a true statement. Without systems, there's no way to grow. This whole thing comes down to predictability. You know, one of my favorite mentors, a gentleman named Dave, he told me all the time that predictability allows for incredible amounts of spontaneity within your life. And what I realized being as an entrepreneur, I'm a dreamer. I'm a visionary. I love to build things. I love the idea of what it could become, what I could actually make. But what I've also realized is that those dreams are really where the implementation stops for me. And without having those systems in place, I'm not going to get the duplicatable results. I'm not going to get something that I can expect to have happen over and over and over unless I can get the systems put into place to get those expected results. Probably the number one place I would say that the systems have to happen, and this is contrary to popular belief for a lot of advisors, is really within your process with your clients. If you're trying to get duplicatable results, things that you can predict and expect upon, a good ROI on your money and the money that you put towards your marketing, sometimes it's not about doing more marketing, John. It's about making the best of what's in front of you in the first place and truly be able to help those clients out and put them in a position where they can become proactive investors rather than reactive consumers. It creates a whole different environment for them as well as for the advisor. And that predictability allows your business to start to scale and scale very quickly.
Absolutely. You know, Mike, it kind of goes back to something I was telling a group of advisors the other day. It's sometimes you don't need more clients.
Right.
Sometimes you need a deeper relationship and a deeper conversation with those clients. And one of the ways that you found to be very successful for you in onboarding new clients and getting an opportunity to go deeper with those clients is in the area of seminars, specifically educational seminars, where you're providing that upfront education. And so, Mike, I want to really talk for just a minute about that whole process. And I want to start with the question, as you're thinking about topics that you want to bring to the marketplace. When you're choosing a topic, what thoughts do you go through and what exercises do you go through to identify what message that you want to deliver you think is going to resonate with an audience?
So the first place I'm going to start is life experiences. One of the big biases that I have was that I lost my father, unfortunately, at 53 years of age. And because of that, I watched my mother go through something that I would never wish on my worst enemy. You know, not only losing the person that she loved for 33 years, but all financial security was just stripped away from her in the blink of an eye. So I'm always going to have a bias on trying to protect people from having that same situation happen to them. From a grand scale, though, John, a really great tool is something called Google Trends. Google Trends is a great way to go out there and see what is trending within the space of retirement planning. You can search for words such as annuities, lifetime income, stock market, taxes, whatever you're going to be looking for, and see which one of those topics are actually trending right now online, and utilize that as a little bit of a barometer to say, you know what, I want to put my money from marketing towards the thing that's going to get me the best ROI or connect with the most amount of people. But the third thing would just be asking my existing clients. find those top tier A and B type of clients and saying, what is it that's on your mind right now? What are the things that you're concerned about that maybe I can help, shed some light on, put you in a position where you can get a better understanding of something that maybe you're concerned about. And I utilize that as a way to understand what I need to do to connect with the rest of the public that we're speaking to on a consistent basis.
So, Mike, as you're identifying topics and you're getting ready to put a marketing piece out to invite people to the event, what's the importance of the title of that message that you're delivering to attract people?
I mean, that's going to be everything. I think that you only have a certain number of seconds to attract someone. So it's got to be something that kind of hits first. And right now, the big thing that we're seeing is taxation. So when you look at the way that our world is structured right now, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a little bit of divisiveness in the rhetoric in our country right now. And I tell people the one thing that brings us all together, no matter what, is the despise of having to write that check in April to the IRS, right? No matter whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, it doesn't matter. We just don't want to have to pay any more taxes than what we would call our fair share. And so I think that it is one thing that allows in an environment such as the one we're in now, for you to be able to attract the majority of the people is utilizing something like taxes that can put that whole thing together and they can figure out what they want to pay for their fair share, not the stuff that they don't get extra credit for.
So you've used Google Trends, you've talked to your customers, you've got an opportunity to identify topics that are of interest to them. You then got a compelling title that's going to hook the audience and say, here's what you're going to hear when they show up. Now, as you're crafting the marketing piece to get people in the room, what are some key areas there as you're putting together that message to share either through a postcard, through an email, through whatever different means they're going to use? What needs to be included in that to get the audience to pay attention to your message?
Yeah, you're selling the dream. That's probably the most simple thing I can say is you're selling what the dream looks like. No one said, man, I can't wait to retire so I can live paycheck to paycheck, right? And so you need to sell the dream within the marketing tool. It's not necessarily the message should be based upon the facts, the numbers, the things that kind of go over certain people's heads. It's the dream. And what's amazing to me, living down here in Florida now for 20 years is seeing how many people have retired and they're not living the lifestyle that they want to. And oftentimes, John, it's not because they can't. It's just no one's ever really shown them how they can. And it's because when they're going to these events, a lot of times we as, financial advisors, we really focus on the mathematics of the whole thing versus what that end game looks like for the client if they actually do things right. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's one of the biggest problems with people's marketing pieces is they get too technical. Mm-hmm. They're too 30,000 foot view and they're not hyper focused on what the dream looks like for that individual. And then that allows you, when you get the people to come into your seminars, to utilize the importance of story and storytelling and what that can mean for them. So they can see that you're not only just there to push the numbers and, write down the penciling and the numbers of everything. It's looking to see what can actually do to change your life and not just short term, but also long term to help you hit your goals.
Yeah. Mike, I think you hit on something really, really important there, and that's the power of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I remind advisors all the time because we're quick to go to the numbers. And you mentioned that we're quick to go to the facts. And, there's an old saying in the financial services industry and really in any industry when it comes to speaking from the stage, facts tell, but stories sell. And, a fact is just that. It's a number, but people can relate to stories. And if you think about the fact that from the time, that all of us were little, we grew up sitting in our mom and dad's lap or grandma and grandpa's lap, and what they do, they read us stories.
Right.
If we go back to the early tribal origins of humanity as a species, our history was passed down before there was written word through stories. So we're uniquely hardwired for stories. And casting that vision of the future that you talked about, allowing them to see what can be, I think is the difference that I see in many ads that I read. It's just not there. Now, Mike, you also talk about, putting together, identifying the topic, identifying the title, now crafting the message to attract the people. Let's talk about the presentation for a minute. So as you're putting the presentation together, is there a specific flow or a specific order that you use when you're crafting a message to deliver to your audience? And I'll add to that. Do you do PowerPoint with that? Do you do a lot of slides? Do you do a few slides? What is your mode of operation when it comes to that you found that works?
So I am a PowerPoint guy. I do use the slides. And I usually start with trying to be a minimalist when it comes to slides. That forces me into storytelling.
Hmm.
Now you do have to be a little bit careful with that because it can also force you to go down on a tangent. And next thing you know, you're 2 hours into a seminar because we like to talk. Most of us as business owners like to talk, but it also allows me to get more in the storytelling versus just the numbers. If you sit down and you really, really, really want to make sure you don't get any appointments, then talk about the numbers the whole time because you will bore people to death and they're just waiting for the food to come out and waiting for this thing to be over. If you can make it where it's relatable to them, John, I think that's a really big, important part. You know, when I first started my company down here in 2008, I lived an hour away. And, so my wife did not get the chance to meet a lot of my clients earlier in my career. But as we moved down here closer to my office, we started doing holiday parties. And what was really interesting is everyone that walked up to my wife and said, man, we love working with your husband. We love the Terrio group. We love doing all these different things. They never once mentioned rate of return. They always mentioned the fact that I was able to relate to them. And I was able to relate to their specific situation that was, good or bad within that situation with them. It was never about me earning them 12% or me earning them 15% or protecting them from losing 20%. It was the fact that we related to them. And that's where the storytelling comes into play. But yes, we definitely use the PowerPoint, but we use those to talk about different scenarios. And one thing that I use is I use the client's name, John and Mary Sample. And I walk John and Mary Sample through a process that I call the 8 elements of financial control, something that we teach at Motiv8 and we utilize at the Terrio group, which really starts with the foundation of everything. If you don't have income that you can count down, you have ifcome. Ifcome creates that certain level of doubt, and now you're in a situation to where you're not living the lifestyle that you want to. And we walk through the 8 elements of financial control, the income optimization. And what does that look like to make your income optimized? How do we protect it from taxation? Then we go to the emergency builder, those what ifs, those short-term scenarios. We build upon that to go with your John and Mary and saying, what if God forbid something bad happens? Right? We walk through that story. And while we're doing this, John, with each individual, we're utilizing a sheet that allows them to mark down how prepared they are. Have they protected themselves from this? Yes or no? And it's allowing them to engage within it themselves so they can see on a score of 0 to 8, 8 being they're perfect and everything's perfect. Where do they actually come in? Because 2 is not as good. Should they look at it from a second opinion type of standpoint? And most of the time, what we find is most people are going to be between that red, which is a very big caution, and orange type of standpoint. Very, very few people are actually at green. And it's not because they've done anything wrong. We actually never want to make them feel bad about it. We just want to let them know that while it may not be exactly what they want, that's more just because it's incomplete, not because we can't fix it. And we discuss a lot of times those different foundational things, the income, the emergency builder, all those things that go along with it, so that we can see that we have a process, we have a system, and it's going to be different than what they've seen in the past where it's just one-dimensional in nature.
Yeah, and I love the example I've seen when I was at your event in New Orleans and had an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to keynote. And thank you for that invitation, by the way. But
Yeah.
when I was there, I loved the illustration that you had of how you use the figure 8
Mm-hmm.
and tie those 8 elements together so that it's this intertwining circle of all these elements interconnecting with each other. The audience can see that visual, and to them it makes sense. And I think
Yeah.
that's another important element that they miss is the relatability of whether it's a PowerPoint image or it's something that you have on a piece of paper that you're showing them, the relatability of the image of something that they can connect with.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's the old Maya Angelou type of quote where she says, it's never what you say to people, it's how you make them feel. Right.
Mhm.
And when you're going through that, they will feel whether or not they're in line with where they should be, or if they're going to need some help from someone like myself, or if it's even just worth a second opinion. So the 8 has been a really great way for me to stay on track as a fiduciary and someone that wants to look out for their client's best interest, but also for the clients to see a credibility factor that this isn't my first day on the job. We have this set up. We've structured this, so that it can be proprietary for you and your family because every one of us is going to have different goals and needs and obstacles.
Absolutely. So, Mike, you mentioned fiduciary, and I'm glad you did, because one of the areas that I find that's of interest, at least to me, because when I was involved in personal production, a lot
Mhm.
of what I did, it was very similar to what you do. I used an educational approach because I believed when you could educate a consumer to help them understand things about financial peace of mind that they didn't know, they could make more informed decisions about their own money,
Yeah.
and that built trust and credibility. So when it comes to the educational elements that you're building into your workshops, where do you see those adding value and setting you apart from others that may be taking a different approach?
Love that question. So The industry as a whole, John, really needs an overhaul, in my opinion, because the industry as a whole has created what I call the EDM methodology, and I don't like it. The EDM methodology is a sales methodology versus a consultative methodology, because what it talks about is let's create a certain emotion. Okay. Now, normally that emotion for retirees is going to be based around some sort of fear, right? Let's scare the client. Let's scare the prospect into making a decision. And then later the math comes into play and the client goes, why did I do that? That was a horrible decision. I made it mainly on emotion. And that's that fear that comes into play that forces them down a road that they end up with a buyer's remorse type of scenario. I believe in the MED scenario where we start with math. Okay. Math can't be disputed. Math is not debatable. 1 + 1 = 2. No matter how much we try to change it, it's a fact, right? So if I'm sitting with you, John, and I look at your portfolio and say, John, you've got X number of dollars. Your portfolio is capable of losing 30%. And then I make that an actual dollar amount, not just a percentage. That's going to create an emotion. So if I look at you and say, you've got $1 million and you could potentially lose $300,000, that math will create an emotion. And I'm fine with you making a decision after that fact, as long as you understand the math behind it. It wasn't just an emotional decision. It was an emotional decision based upon math. And I really think that that's where this industry has gone wrong for clients, is we focus so much on scaring people as an industry. If you look at the marketing that goes on with a lot of different companies out there these days, it's more about fear than it is education. And I think that clients are well aware of the fact that they don't like that feeling anymore. If you look at clients, so many of them have gone to advisor to advisor to advisor. And by the time they're sitting down with you, any of you that are listening to the podcast right now, when they're sitting with you, more than likely they've sat down with 7 or even 8 different advisors and throughout their lifetime. Why are they sitting with you? And my belief is they're sitting with you because they're looking for something different. And so you as the advisor have the ability to either be that change and be someone that's different and actually help these clients through an educational consultative approach, or you can just be like everybody else. And that's another reason why we see so many people walking out the door, because you haven't convinced them that this is something that they haven't seen in the last 20, 30 years of preparing for their retirement.
Yeah, it's the used car salesman approach versus, the collaborative approach. If I go see my doctor doesn't write me a prescription until he walks me through a consultative process to find out what's wrong with me. And I love that approach when it comes to the financial services world, because it gives us an opportunity to truly understand what it is our clients want, what they need. If they have fears or concerns, what they are and how we address them. If they have goals or objectives for the future, how we help achieve those. And then at the end of the day, the products and services that we offer simply become the tools to help solve those problems or achieve those goals or objectives. That's the way I love to sell. But you're right. It is a backwards approach from the way many in our industry do seminars and do workshops and do selling. So to me, education leads to a more informed consumer. And I believe that also, and validate me if I'm wrong here, that also builds credibility and trust in you as a financial professional.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. You nailed it when you were going through the planning process of learning all the different things you have to learn before you make a diagnosis, right? I mean, if I walked into a doctor and I just said, oh, my left arm hurts, and they said, well, we should probably amputate, I'm out. Right? but we see that a lot of times in our industry all the time, where people walk in and say, well, and you see the leading questions, right? Oh, so you're looking for something that protects you from taxes, right? Okay, great. And probably you want to make sure you avoid probate, right? And creditors, you don't want creditors to come after you. And more than likely, you'd like to have a lifetime income. Well, we all know what they're pitching at that point in time, right? Instead of really finding out what it is that is making that client tick, but really where the math comes into play behind it. The one thing too with the math is a lot of times when you show mathematically that their concern isn't really a concern anymore, that also gives you as a planner so much more opportunity to help them in different ways that they never even thought were possible. And oftentimes, especially when you have a couple, one individual and the other normally have different risk tolerances. They normally have different spending habits. And so the planning aspect that we talk about when you mention fiduciary as well, that's such an important concept, because you're able to show them, yes, that's a reasonable concern, or you know what, there's no reason to be concerned about that. And either way, we can take that and those nuggets and go out and make a better plan for them.
Absolutely. So Mike, you're in the middle of a workshop and you've got a room full of people. Are there some tips that you can share? Make sure that you're properly reading the room so that you know you're connecting with the people in the room. What are
Yeah,
some tips that you use to do that?
you got to connect with the room, right?
Mhm.
One of the worst things you can do is go up and just read off of a script. You got to connect with the room. You got to let people know that you're human. You got to let them know that you relate to them. So one of a really simple thing we do, John, is we just give everyone name tags. And before the event starts, I walk around and I introduce myself. I let them know I'm going to be speaking at that event, and I get to learn those names. And I'm usually going to look for a couple that I'm going to talk to about long-term care. I'm usually going to look for a couple that I'm going to talk to about market risk or risk in general. And I'm picking those names up and I'm remembering those things. But what I'm also doing is if I see someone that I can feel is I'm starting to lose them, I'm going to engage with them. I'm going to say, hey, John, what do you think about this? Or have you ever run into a situation like this? And it gets them back, and it also keeps the rest of the room listening because they don't want to be called out, right? It's like elementary school where you don't want to be called out to read part of the next chapter in Hamlet,
Right.
right? You just don't want to have to do that. It's the same thing. So they're going to pay a lot more attention, but we have a lot more fun. We actually use a game within our system, within our process, where we actually do a numbers game with them to teach them the importance of strategy. And it keeps that audience engaged and informed where it's not just math and saying, here's what you should do and here's why you should do it. It's not just a sales pitch. We actually keep them involved, which is going to be a big deal. But keeping those names in front of you, you'd be amazed. They feel so much more connected to you. And you mentioned credibility, you mentioned trust. Those are some of the first steps that you can have to where it feels like you're building more than rapport. Because I say all the time, rapport is BS. It's the relationship that actually drives that whole thing for you.
Mhm.
And that's what builds your company is relationships. Because when you build the relationships, they tell other relationships about how you made them feel, how it was different. And then guess what? You become different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So Mike, the event's over.
Okay.
You had a successful event. People have scheduled appointments. They're coming in the door to meet with you, or you're meeting with them in their home, or whatever that process looks like. How do you make the transition from educator to advisor?
Questions. So the number one thing I do is I ask a question and I shut up. I know there's probably a better, more polite way of saying it, but that's literally what has to happen. You just got done speaking to them for an hour and change, and
Mhm.
you've told them all the great things about you. They've bought in, they're in your office. It's no longer about you, the advisor. It is about the client, in my opinion. So the best thing you can do is ask questions. When they give you an answer, you need to hear what they're saying. Don't just listen to what they're saying. Hear what they're saying, right? And really be able to start interpreting what they're actually trying to say, because you need to drive out of them vulnerabilities that allow them to realize what they're actually really truly concerned about. Because normally when people come in, they're going to give you surface answers, John. They're going to say, I don't want to lose money. I don't want to pay excess taxation. I don't want to pay a ton in fees. And so then I'll normally look back and say, you know what? I've never had someone that did. I've never had someone that came in and said, hey, do me a favor. Lose my money as fast as possible. Make sure I pay a ton in fees. And I want to give the IRS as much as I possibly can. Those are surface level questions that our industry as a whole has taught people to think that that's what they're supposed to say. But I sat down with a gentleman last week, and that came from my last seminar. And when we sat down, I said, you know, what's important about your money to you? What do you want your money to accomplish for you? And from that point forward, it started a whole different rolling ball, because it got to the point where I realized it wasn't about rate of return. It was
Mhm.
about the fact that he lost his wife to suicide,
Mhm.
and that was 10 years ago. And it completely threw him into a downward spiral. And that now his number one most important thing are his two sons and his four grandchildren, three grandsons and one granddaughter, and making sure that he's able to supply and help for them, because no one ever helped him in his whole life. And he was an educator out of New York, and he went on with all these different things. And so getting to the point where you can actually relate to him and then solve those big obstacles, those big hurdles. I'll never be able to give him the peace of mind that he had before he lost his wife. And it was a horrible situation. But having a conversation like that's what builds relationships versus rapport. And that's what's going to allow him to get a much better plan, because within a plan, junk in is junk out. But when I can get the real story from the person of what they really want me to help accomplish for them, which for him was tax efficiency, making sure we took care of his sons, and then from there, the grandchildren, those are the number one goals that he has. He's got a pension. He's good to go. He's got income optimization taken care of. That's what's going to give him peace of mind, so he feels that he's able to leave that legacy. We never talked about 10% rate of returns. We never talked about even what type of tax bracket he's in. He just wants to know that he's doing what's best for the people he loves the most. And that's the impact that he wants to have. It's not the rate of return.
Mike, I love that you very simply said questions. And that's something I've taught for years. And I was just having a conversation with a good friend over the weekend and reminding him that the person that asks the questions controls the conversation. And the other thing that you said I think is so valid is oftentimes a client will give us an answer because they don't really know what they want until you get an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper.
It's true.
And so one of the tactics that I always used is when someone would come in and say, well, I want to save money on taxes. Well, my follow-up question to that would be, well, Mike, tell me why that's important to you. And then again, stop and listen, because the person that asks questions controls the conversation, but the person that listens, and I love you said that, controls the relationship.
Well, and the important part is silence sometimes is the best thing ever, because what they're doing at that point in time is you've asked them a question that actually made them think about it.
Right.
And so, one thing to keep in mind, and you mentioned this earlier, but I say a little bit differently, is when it comes out of my mouth, it's a sales pitch. If it comes out of your mouth, it's a fact. Right. And so that's where questions and being quiet are the most important things. And, being a guy who has ADD, I had to make sure I set up some fail safes within my process. And one of the things I utilize is a smart board. And I use that smart board because I'm writing down the information in front of them. And while I'm writing, it makes it almost impossible for me to write and talk at the same time. And that allows that silence that's so necessary for the client to really soak in what they just told me.
Yeah. And when you can truly get, like you said, to the heart of the matter and discover what it is they truly want, then you can turn that around and say, if I can solve this problem and do it this way, is that what you want?
Right.
And the minute they say that's what I want, they've already bought your product or your service before you've ever had an opportunity to share it with them. But they're looking for the end result. And I think that's really what you're saying is you bring the end result to the consumer first, and then you show them how the features of the product or service actually accomplish that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the common misconceptions with our business, John, is that the people feel that the client buys you in the second or third appointment. That's not true. They buy you that first time they see you. We call that the evaluate stage. And that's where I evaluate them and they evaluate me. That is where they decide whether or not they feel like they can build that credibility and trust with me. And that's when they buy us. That's when they buy the process. That's when they buy the dream. And that's really
and neuroscience tells us, as we look at, new studies in neuroscience, they buy into you within the first few seconds of that very first meeting, whether they're going to give you a chance to go deeper with them.
That's it.
And so that first impression is so, so important.
Yes.
So, Mike, we're getting close to the end of our time today. So I want to throw one more question at you. And then I got one more surprise question I'm going to give you on top of that. As we think about best practices, we're in a world that we're either under the best interest standard or Reg BI or the fiduciary standard, depending on your level of licensure. What are some best practices for effective follow-up that you'd recommend after an event's over?
The best practice for follow-up would be staying in front of people on a consistent basis, but really addressing the obstacles up front. So what I did is I took the main 5 objections that we would get. So whatever my client concierge would get, I asked her, what are the 5 main objections that you're getting? And sometimes it's about price. Sometimes it's about, we don't want to commit right now, whatever those 5 objections are. And what we do in a follow-up scenario is we address those concerns right off the bat. We put the elephant into the room, as they say, right? And there may be a video of me saying, one of the common things I hear from people is I'm not ready to move right now, or I already have a financial advisor. And then I address that situation. Maybe it's me saying, completely understand where that's not what we're asking for. Come on in, have a cup of coffee and just see if there's some synergy. If there's not, worst case scenario, I met a good friend. And we address those situations up front to build that relationship, which I think is a very important component. Oftentimes, that 43% of all advisors never even follow up with a prospect. So if you want to beat your competition, all you have to do to beat half of them is just call someone, right? But it also takes 8 to 12 touch points just to close them. And so no matter how good you are as a financial advisor, you will only close the person the first appointment 2% of the time, right? And so for me, it's about building that relationship over time, doing it the right way. But I like to take those objections that they're going to have, put them in the way, get them out of the way, and move on towards what we really need to do here, which is help each other make this thing work.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a number of studies I've seen out there that validate exactly what you said. And the vast majority of customers, the numbers in the 80% range, that aren't
Mhm.
going to even consider making a purchase from you until they've had a minimum of 5 to 7 touch points. So
Yeah,
it's that consistency and staying in front of them. And I think that goes back to something you and I talked about when we were having dinner the last time we were together, is the fact that people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be valued, and they want to be appreciated.
yeah,
And taking the educational approach gives you the opportunity to do that. And then continuing that follow up, because for you, it's about making sure that if they've addressed a concern, you want to make sure you've met that concern. If they say,
absolutely.
I've got an unachieved goal or an objective, you're committed to helping them achieve that. And you're following up because of their best interests, not the fact that you necessarily want to make a sale. And I think that, again, that's something
Mhm.
the industry's missing, is that it's client focused for their benefit. And if we give
Yeah.
the client what they want, then they're going to give us what we want. And that's the opportunity to earn their business.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal business, John. We have the ability to really change people's lives and also change ours at the same time. I mean, what a great gig to be
Yeah.
able to do those type of things and really have that much of an impact on someone. To me, is just so powerful. But many people miss it because they're just pushing the product versus actually working through the whole process for themselves.
Right. Absolutely. All right. So, Mike, here's your bonus question.
Oh,
Out of all the things I should have asked you related to today's topic that I didn't,
ooh.
what's one last thing that you would want to share from your heart about your educational approach to workshops and seminars, and something that we should have talked about, but we didn't in today's podcast?
I would say everything that it all boils down to client experience. And I tell people these stories all the time, and I know we don't have much time, so I won't get into it deep, but you've all experienced different experiences within sales or different environments, and one of them made you feel good and one of them made you feel bad. When I look at our client experience, our prospects walk in, they're not getting sludgy coffee. We have 20 different types of coffee they can choose from. We have a menu. We call the night before. We make sure that whatever their favorite cookies are, we cook them. If they have a gluten allergy, we have that available for them. It's about the client experience and making people as comfortable as possible. But really, what I would say is whatever the industry norm is doing, in a lot of different situations, it's not a bad idea to do the complete opposite. I don't ask for statements at the first appointment. Clients come in for the first appointment, and I'm blessed enough, John. I've been doing this now for almost 20 years in my own, down here in Florida. I love this job. I love what I do. I love meeting with my clients. I don't ask for statements at the first appointment. For me, I don't get impressed or depressed by people's net worth. I want to find out what their issues are and I want to solve their problems. The rest of it will be taken care of by a higher power and take care of me because we did good by the clients. And that's a big thing for me, is do good for them. They'll do good for you in the end.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And when I went back to my own personal practice, I did the very same thing. That first appointment was a get to know you so that I can identify what you needed and whether or
Yeah.
not I could help you fulfill that. So it was an opportunity for them to say no to me or me to say no to them. But if we came together and said, yeah, there's some things here that you need help with and I can help you, if they're willing to go deeper, people appreciated that and they didn't want to be taken
Absolutely.
down a path or sold something they didn't want. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I love the fact that you talk about the client experience. I just finished an incredible book by Jesse Cole, who's the creator of the Savannah Bananas, this phenomenon
Wow.
that's taken over baseball. And so there's an incredible book along those lines called Fans First. And if you've not had an opportunity to pick up that book, those of you listening to the podcast, and you want to learn how to create an exceptional experience, Jesse Cole has a great philosophy for the Savannah Bananas, and I think it's very apropos to our industry. Fans first, entertain always. And you notice what Mike shared, that when they're walking in the door, he's being fans first. He's getting on the phone and identifying as they're coming in, what's your favorite cookie? You have a gluten allergy. Going above and beyond so that when they show up, they create what I call an exceptional experience. And Mike, I know when they have that and they leave, they walk away going, wow, I've never walked in and had to select from 20 different types of coffee. I've
Yeah.
never walked in the door and had somebody offer me my favorite cookies, and not just one, but a plate of them, and they were warm and fresh. Those type things stand out and make you
Yep.
unique and different in the marketplace. And I think that's a huge part of your success. So, Mike, if people want to know more about you and what you do, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Probably the easiest way is going to be able to go to one of the websites or just hit me up on LinkedIn. You can just find me at Michael Terrio on LinkedIn would be a great place to do it, or at official Michael Terrio at Instagram. Websites would be for my personal production, the terriogroup.com. That's spelled Terrio, not the Terrier. A lot of people say the Terrier Group, or Motiv8 Advisors, MOTIV, the number 8 advisors. Motiv8advisors.com would be another great place to find me.
Perfect. Very good. And ladies and gentlemen, this, you can find Legacy Marketing Group. We are a products development company. We've been building fixed indexed annuities for the financial services industry for well over 3 decades. And if you think about who we are and what we do, we work with multiple major carriers in the marketplace, bringing unique solutions to bear so that when Mike has an opportunity to identify an accumulation or an income opportunity with a client, we're one of the folks that he can lean into to say, hey, can you help me with that? So Mike, I want to say thank you for being on the podcast today and being our guest. I love what you guys are doing at Motiv8. You guys have got a phenomenal model that are helping financial professionals really identify how to scale their business. And I applaud you for that. And what you're continuing to do in your own personal practice and setting the standard for what others should follow. I applaud you for that as well. And I appreciate the friendship and the unique opportunity I've gotten to get to know you. So thank you for being our guest today. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for jumping in and tuning in to the Tune Into Sales podcast. I'm Dr. John Terry with Legacy Marketing Group. If you have questions related to us, again, our number, 800-395-1053. Press 1 at the voice prompt. You're immediately connected to our internal sales desk. Those people can help you answer any questions you may have about who we are, what we do, and who we work with in the industry. And we look forward to an opportunity to be able to serve you and assist you and help you solve your clients' money problems. So on behalf of all of us here at Legacy, thanks for joining me. Have a great day.